고향이 어디예요?
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Quick Korean. Today we will be studying the section 고향이 어디예요? Or where are you from? The topic of today's lesson is hometown foods. We will learn some descriptive verbs and vocabulary related to weather expressions, and the grammar points 고, and which expresses equality, and Pugh, irregular verbs. After studying this lesson, you will be able to use a variety of descriptive verbs and introduce your hometown. Lastly, in the culture section, we will explore Korean weather. Well then, let's get started. First, listen carefully to the dialogue. Today's dialogue takes place in the company lounge between Mr. Lee and Mr. Kim, who is a section head in the same company. Mr. Kim asks Mr. Lee about his hometown. Where do you think Mr. Lee's hometown is? What kind of place do you think it is? Let's take a listen to their conversation and find out.
이 부장님은 고향이 어디예요? 대전이에요. 교통도 편리하고 살기가 좋아요. 요즘 대전 날씨는 어때요? 서울 날씨와 비슷해요. 아주 더워요.
Were you able to understand the conversation? So, where is Mr. Lee's hometown? That's right, it's in Daejeon. Now, before taking a closer look at the conversation, let's first look at the vocabulary and grammar that come out in the dialogue. First is the vocabulary section of this lesson. Our first word here is 고향. Please read along and repeat after me. 고향. 고향. Now, Mr. Lee currently lives in Seoul, but he was born in Daejeon. So, his hometown, or 고향, is Daejeon. Now, let's go ahead and say this word one more time. 고향. Our next phrase here is 교통이 편리하다. Now please read along and repeat after me. 교통이 편리하다. 교통이 편리하다. Now here, this word 교통 means traffic or transportation, like the subway and bus. And here, 편리하다 means convenient. So if you put them together, you can see that it means like the transportation is convenient. Now, let's say the bus stop is close to Mr. Lee's home. The subway station is also close. So you can see for Mr. Lee, near his house, the transportation is convenient. So we say that this phrase right here, 교통이 편리하다. So let's go ahead and say that one more time. 교통이 편리하다. Now our next word here is 살기가 좋다. Please read along and repeat after me. 살기가 좋다. 살기가 좋다. Now here in this picture you can see that here there's a house, and near the house you can see that there's a bank, a subway station, hospital, and mart. So we can describe this by saying that it is a nice place to live, or using the phrase 살기가 좋다. Now let's say this together one more time. 살기가 좋다. Now our next word here is 날씨. Please read along and repeat after me. 날씨. 날씨. Now you can see by these pictures here, it's clear outside, it's raining, it's snowing, it's cloudy. So these all describe the weather, or you would say in Korean, 날씨. Now let's go ahead and say this together one more time. 날씨. Now our next word here is 비슷하다. Please read along and repeat after me. 비슷하다. 비슷하다. Now here on the left side, we have Seoul, and on the right side here, we have Tokyo. Now both cities have scenery, weather, and the people don't appear that much different. So we could describe them as similar or 비슷하다. Now let's go ahead and say this word together one more time. 비슷하다. Now, let's review the words that we just learned in this section. Now, Mr. Lee was born in Daejeon. So that would make Daejeon Mr. Lee's what? Correct. It would be his 고향 or hometown. Daejeon is Mr. Lee's 고향. Mr. Lee's home is close to a bus stop and subway station. How could we describe his home? The transportation is convenient, so we could say, right, 교통이 편리하다. 교통이 편리하다. Now here in this picture, there is a bank, hospital, subway station, and mart near the house right there in the middle. Now it's pretty convenient. How could we describe it? Right, we could say 살기가 좋다. Now here in this picture, you see different weather conditions. We have it's clear, raining, snowing, and cloudy. So what word can we use in Korean to describe this? Correct. The word is 날씨. Now, Korea, Seoul, and Japan's Tokyo are not that different. What word could we use to describe them? Right, we could use the word 비슷하다. Great!
이 부장님은 고향이 어디예요? 대전이에요. 교통도 편리하고 살기가 좋아요. 요즘 대전 날씨는 어때요? 서울 날씨와 비슷해요. 아주 더워요.
Now, let's take a closer look at the dialogue for this section. Here, we have Mr. Lee, the department head of his company, and Mr. Kim, the section head, discussing hometowns. Now, Mr. Kim is really curious about Mr. Lee's hometown. So he asked Mr. Lee, 이 부장님은 고향이 어디예요? Or, Mr. Lee, where is your hometown? So, Mr. Lee is from Daejeon. So he answers by saying 대전이에요, meaning it's Daejeon. So now, how was Daejeon? Daejeon is a place where the transportation is very convenient and a lot of establishments are nearby, making it a nice place to live. So he adds 교통도 편리하고 살기가 좋아요, or that the transportation is convenient and it's a nice place to live. So Mr. Kim is also curious about the weather in Daejeon. So he asks, 요즘 대전 날씨는 어때요? Or how is the weather in Daejeon lately? Now, Daejeon is very hot and the weather is actually very similar to Seoul at the time. So Mr. Lee responds by saying, 서울 날씨와 비슷해요. 아주 더워요. Great. So how about you all? Where is your hometown? And what's the weather like in your hometown? Well, pretty soon you'll be able to talk about your hometown just like Mr. Lee did right here. Great. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the grammar that comes from this dialogue. Our first grammar here is 고. Now, 고 is used to combine two facts, events, or statements into one sentence. Now, 고 is used with descriptive verbs. So, if we look at an example here, we have 교통도 편리하고 살기가 좋아요. Now, recall Daejeon. What kind of place was Daejeon? Daejeon is a place that the transportation is convenient, fact 1, and it is also a nice place to live, fact 2. So, in Korean, we have the 교통도 편리하다, and we have the 살기가 좋다. So we have these two sentences and we want to combine them. So what we do is, you could see here with the 편리하다, behind the 편리하다, the 고 here is attached to get 편리하고, and we get these two sentences link together. Now let's go ahead and read through this sentence together. 교통도 편리하고 살기가 좋아요. Great. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the next example. Here we have 제임스 씨는 친절하고 재미있어요. So here this is a sentence about James. And what kind of person is James? Well, he's kind, or in Korean we'd say 친절하다. And he's fun, or we would say 재미있다 in Korean. So now we want to take these two facts about James and combine it into one sentence. So what we did in the sentence here is we originally had the 친절하다 right there. And as you can see, behind the 친절하다, the 고 was attached. And now these two facts are linked together in one sentence. Now let's go ahead and read this together. We have 제임스 씨는 친절하고 재미있어요. Great. Now, just like that, 고 is used with descriptive verbs such as 편리하다 and 친절하다. Now the usage is as follows. Here in the case of 편리하다, what we do is we have the 편리하 and the 타 is removed and we add 고 to get 편리하고. Likewise, in the second example here, we had the original 친절하다, but what we do is we just take the 친절하, remove the 타, add 고 to get us 친절하고. Now, go ahead and please repeat after me. We have 편리하다, 고, 편리하고, 친절하다, 고, 친절하고. Great. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the next grammar point here. Our next grammar point here is the Pugh irregular verbs. Now, recall, we learned about this right here. We learned it as, what sound does it make? It makes a Pugh sound. Now in Korean, it has a name and it's called Pugh. So what we call this is Pugh irregular verbs. Now, what makes it so irregular? Well, what makes it so irregular is when Pugh in a verb is followed by a vowel, it changes to either u or o. Now let's go ahead and this will probably become a little more clear as we look at some examples. Now in this first sentence here we have 아주 더워요. Now, 더워요, where does it originally come from? It originally comes from the verb 덥다. But what happens is this 덥다, when we use this grammar form right here, it's combined with 어요. Now, you can see here, we have an 어 here, and when this Pugh here is followed by the 어, this Pugh actually changes to an 우. So we get 더우, and then combine it with the 어요 here to get 어요, to get our 더워요, like you see here. Now let's go ahead and read this sentence together. We have 아주 더워요. Great. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the next sentence. Here we have 일을 도와요. Now, again, this 도와요 originally comes from the verb 돕다. And in the usage, it is combined with 아요. So notice, because after the Pugh, this comes here, this Pugh, original Pugh here actually changes to an o, like this. So we have 도, and then this Pugh here changes to o, and combined with 아요, we get 도와요, as you can see right here. Now let's go ahead and read through this sentence together. 일을 도와요. Great. Now if you look at the usage here, this Pugh irregular verbs applies to verbs such as 돕다 and 돕다. And as you can see here, this 돕다, as shown before, is combined with 어요, so the Pugh actually changes to 우. So what happens is we get 더우 and then combine with 어요 to get 더워요, like you see right here. And in the case of 덥다, again, because it's followed by 아요, the Pugh changes to an O. So what we get is 더, and then the Pugh again changes to this O, as you can see here, and combine with 아 and 요 to get us 더워요. Now, please go ahead and repeat after me. 덥다, 어요, 더워요. 덥다, 아요, 더워요. Great, excellent. Now let's go ahead and listen to the dialogue once more.
이 부장님은 고향이 어디예요? 대전이에요. 교통도 편리하고 살기가 좋아요. 요즘 대전 날씨는 어때요? 서울 날씨와 비슷해요. 아주 더워요.
Now, let's take another look at the dialogue. This time, let's read through it together. Listen and repeat after me. 이 부장님은 고향이 어디예요? 대전이에요. 교통도 편리하고 살기가 좋아요. 요즘 대전 날씨는 어때요? 서울 날씨와 비슷해요. 아주 더워요. Now, this time, we'll go through the dialogue again, and you read the part of Mr. Lee.
이 부장님은 고향이 어디예요? 요즘 대전 날씨는 어때요?
Now, this time, we'll go through the dialogue once more, but this time, you read the role of Mr. Kim.
대전이에요. 교통도 편리하고 살기가 좋아요. 서울 날씨와 비슷해요. 아주 더워요.
Now it's time for speaking practice. We'll practice using the vocabulary and grammar that we learned earlier in this section. Now in this section, look at the picture and complete the sentence. Now in the picture on the left here, you can see that Chunsu is helping an elderly woman. How would we describe him? Well, we can say he's kind or 친절하다. Now on the picture on the right here, we can see that Chunsu and his friends are talking. His friends are laughing. So how would you describe Chunsu here? We can describe him as fun and interesting or 재미있다. Now, how would we combine these two facts about Chunsu into one sentence? Right, we could say 준수는 친절하고 재미있어요. Now, how is 대전? Well, the transportation is convenient, right? You can see here with the 교통이 편리하다. Now, we also know it's a nice place to live, and you can see here, we could say 살기가 좋다. Now, if we want to combine these two facts about 대전 into one sentence, how would we make such a sentence? We would say 대전은 교통이 편리하고 살기가 좋아요. Now here we have the beach. Now on the picture on the left, it looks very quiet, so we can describe it using the word 조용하다. And on the right, the beach looks very beautiful. So we can use the word 아름답다. Now, if we want to combine these two facts about this beach into a sentence, how would we make that sentence? Correct. We could say 바닷가가 조용하고 아름다워요. Now this time, look at the picture and answer the question. Now the question presented here is 마이클 씨 고향 날씨는 어때요? Or how is the weather in Michael's hometown? Well, if you look at this thermometer here, you can see that it's 40 degrees. That would be in Celsius. In Fahrenheit, that would be about 104. So how could we describe it? We would say 아주 더워요. Now, this time, the question asks, 김치와 떡볶이 맛이 어때요? Or, how does kimchi and 떡볶이 taste? Well, have you ever tried these foods before? As you can see by the picture here, they're red, and they contain red pepper paste and red pepper powder. So, how would you imagine they would taste? Well, in Korean, we could say 아주 매워요. Great. Now it's time for listening practice. Mr. Lee and Mr. Kim continue their conversation from earlier. This time, Mr. Lee asks Mr. Kim about his hometown. Let's take a listen to their conversation.
김 과장님은 고향이 어디예요? 전주예요. 교통도 복잡하지 않고 살기가 좋아요. 요즘 전주 날씨는 어때요? 대전 날씨와 비슷해요. 아주 더워요.
Were you able to understand the conversation? Well, let's go ahead and answer some questions to check your understanding. Now here in question number 1, it asks, 김 과장님 고향은 어디예요? So, or where is Mr. Kim's hometown? Now we have two answer choices here. We have 대전 and 전주. So, do you remember where his hometown is? Right. He said it was in 전주. So the correct answer would be 전주. Now the next question, question number 2 asks, 들은 이야기와 같으면 O, 다름은 X 하십시오. So in other words, we have two statements here, and if the statement is true, we mark it with an O, and if the statement is false, we mark it with an X. Now the first statement here says, 교통이 아주 복잡합니다. Or the transportation is very complicated. So, is the transportation complicated in 전주? No, right? It was described as 교통도 복잡하지 않고 살기가 좋아요. Therefore, the correct answer would be X. Now, the next statement asks, 전주의 날씨는 대구와 비슷합니다. Or the weather in Jeonju is similar to Daegu. Now, are the weather of the two cities similar? Now, how was it? In the conversation, he said it was similar to Daejeon. That is very hot. So therefore, the correct answer would be X. Well done. Now, it is time for the Vocabulary Plus section. Here, we will look at more descriptive verbs and words related to weather. Now, the first word here is 시원하다. Now, in the picture here, it's autumn, and the wind is blowing. So, how would you describe Korean's autumn? Well, we could say that it is 한국의 가을은 시원해요. Now the next word here is 춥다. Now in this picture here, it's winter and it snows. And Mr. Lee and Mrs. Kim are wearing coats and scarves. So how does the winter look here? Right, we could say 한국의 겨울은 추워요. Now the next word here is 복잡하다. Now here there are a lot of buses and cars on the road. And you can see that that intersection looks very clogged. So how could you describe the traffic situation in this picture here? Right, we could say 교통이 복잡해요. Now the next word here is 같다. So here you can see that in this picture, the girl's name is 김영진 and the boy's name here is also 김영진. So you could see that the two names are the same. So we can say that by saying 두 사람 이름이 같아요. Now the next word here is 다르다. Now here you can see that these men here are holding pumpkins. And if we look at this pumpkin here on the left, how does that pumpkin look? Well, it's small, right? And then there's this pumpkin here on the right. How could you describe that pumpkin there? You could say it looks pretty big, right? So how do the sizes of the two pumpkins compare? They're different, right? So in Korean we could say 크기가 다릅니다. Now the next word here is 불편하다. Now in the picture here you can see Junsu sat down on the subway, but his seat is very narrow and tight. So how could you describe his seat? Well, we can describe it as uncomfortable or 자리가 불편해요. Now the next word here is 편하다. Now in the picture here, Jimin is wearing her pajamas. So when you wear pajamas, how does it feel? It's pretty comfortable, right? So we could say that 잠옷은 정말 편해요. Now the next word here is 맑다. So how is the river water here? It's very clean. You can see the fish swimming. So we can describe the water here as 강물이 맑아요. Now let's review the words that we just learned. Here we will find antonyms of the words based on the picture. How would you describe Junsu's seat here? Well, it looks very uncomfortable or 불편해요. So what was the opposite of 불편하다? Right, it would be comfortable or 편하다. So the opposite of 불편하다 is 편하다. Now how is the size of the pumpkin? The sizes are different, or we use the word 다르다. Now what's the opposite of 다르다? Right, it would be 같다. So the opposite of 다르다 is 같다. Now here the road looks somewhat deserted with only a few cars and buses on the road. What word would you use to describe a crowded road? Right, if you recall, we used the word 복잡하다. Now let's go ahead and read through these words one more time. We have 편하다, 같다, 복잡하다. Well done! Finally, it's time for the Korean culture section. Today we will explore Korean weather. What kind of weather do you think Korea has? Well, let's go ahead and find out.
한국의 날씨. 한국은 봄, 여름, 가을, 겨울이 뚜렷이 구분되는 사계절을 가지고 있습니다. 봄과 가을은 맑은 날이 많아서 지내기 좋지만 여름은 장마가 있어 습하고 덥습니다. 겨울은 춥고 건조하며 때론 많은 눈이 내립니다.
Now, let's go ahead and review what we learned today. Today's topic was hometown foods. We learned about some descriptive verbs and vocabulary related to weather expressions, and the grammar points 고, which expresses equality, and Pugh irregular verbs. Finally, in the culture section, we explored Korean weather. So, how do you feel? Do you think you can introduce your hometown? Great! Well, this brings us to the end of this lesson. See you next time!